In progress.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the work session for the Metro Council, February 6, 2024. Connor, will you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Councillor Wong.
Present.
Councillor Lewis.
Present.
Councillor Nolan.
Present.
Councillor Simpson.
Good morning. Present.
Good morning. Councillors Rosenthal and Gonzalez are both excused today, and President Peterson.
Here, thank you. We have one agenda item today, Council, and it is the Keller Auditorium renovation concept and process update. I want to specifically thank staff for coming forward and keeping us updated on this. The Keller Auditorium plays an essential role in Portland's arts community, providing the only local space large enough for Broadway, opera, and ballet productions, as well as revenue to support Portland 5 operations. The City of Portland and P5 have identified structural, accessibility, operational, and guest comfort challenges with the Keller Auditorium and are exploring options to remedy these challenges. Options include renovating the existing building or building new facilities on-site or at alternative sites. Last year, Metro and the City of Portland provided matching funds to the Halpern Landscape Conservancy, who engaged a team of consultants to perform a comprehensive innovation study. Today, we will have Robin Williams and additional guests here to help share the results of the study and introduce the rest of our folks. So I'll turn it over to Robin. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to let Carl Lyle with the City of Portland lead off.
Thanks, Robin. Good morning, Metro Councilors and President. My name is Carl Lyle, and I work on spectator venues for the City of Portland. Robin will also help introduce this item, who's Executive Director of the Portland 5 Centers for the Performing Arts. So we're here today to talk about the Keller Auditorium and what's going on there. So if I could have my slides, someone has my...
Yeah, they are up on Zoom and should...
There we go. Okay, great.
Could you adjust your mic so that you're talking directly into it? Thanks.
How about that? Is that any better?
Better, yes.
Okay,
thanks.
great. So here we go. So the primary purpose of today's work session is to hear from the Halpern Landscape Conservancy and their very talented team about the work they completed last year on a conceptual renovation of the facility. This work was funded in part by grants from both the city and Metro, and they're thrilled to be able to present it to you today. But before we hand it over to them, Robin and I would like to provide a little background on how we got to this point and what we can expect to happen in the coming months, leading up to direction by City Council, anticipated sometime in summer, about whether to pursue renovation or replacement of the Keller Auditorium. So I'll now ask Robin to provide a little background on the importance and the role of the Keller in Portland. So if we could have the next slide.
Okay, thank you, Carl. At more than 100 years old, Keller is the oldest of the three venues that Portland 5 oversees. It's the home to Oregon Ballet Theater, Portland Opera, and Broadway in Portland. It hosts 400,000 guests annually, or about 40% of our total guests. Because of the size of its stage, it's the only venue in the region that can meet the staging needs of our Broadway series and really large-scale operas and other very large productions. Because it has 3,000 seats, it allows very expensive shows to be economically viable. So it ensures that we can bring these shows to Portland. Keller supports hundreds of good-paying jobs for stagehands, engineers, custodians, ushers, security agents, ticketing staff, and food and beverage workers. Its estimated economic impact was more than $28 million in direct and indirect spending, and approximately $13 million in labor income. Now, the revenues generated by the Keller are equal to approximately 50% of P5's annual revenues. And this is revenue that we depend on to support the nonprofit usage of all of our venues. Now, our greatest concern is about the renovation is the multi-year closure at Keller. This could negatively impact our regional arts and culture organizations, as the revenue from the Keller is needed to help subsidize these local nonprofit users of our halls. It would also negatively impact the local economy because there's nowhere in the region where large theaters needing that 2,500 to 3,000 capacity could go. And so these shows would opt to skip Portland. And the lost jobs from the staff who work all the shows at the Keller would be huge. Restarting Broadway after going dormant for so many years would be no small task. And according to Broadway Across America, it could take years to rebuild to its current subscriber strength. Now, this is a very complex decision, and definitely we need to be talking about the future of Keller because its current status isn't viable. And it does require some very careful thought and consideration due to the impacts on P5 and the arts and culture and economic well-being. So we're very appreciative to have this time in front of Metro Council and appreciate your willingness to take a thoughtful and well-informed look at this issue. So, Carl, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Thank you, Robin. If I could have the next slide, please. Okay, yeah, so just a little background on how we got to this spot. The impetus for this work really began with regulatory agencies at the city listing the Keller Auditorium on the city's official unreinforced masonry building list in or about 2016. This is because significant portions of the building's structural system predate the 1960s renovation. It looks like a 1960s building, but in reality, significant portions of the structural system beneath that 1960s facade date from 1917. And if you'll recall, the original form of the building was essentially a large brick box. At the time, it was anticipated that publicly owned buildings, at the time it was listed on the list of URMs, or unreinforced masonry buildings, it was anticipated that publicly owned buildings on the URM list would be mandated to undergo seismic retrofits according to a set timeline. It was anticipated to be about 10 years. So we thought we had a ticking clock to actually make sure this building was brought up to current codes. That ended up not happening eventually. That's another story. But as a result of that listing and the identification of the building's structural challenges, the city began working with a consulting engineer and architectural team to study the seismic condition of the building and understand what it might take to address the issues. This work was completed in 2020. There were other things happening in 2020, so we actually held on to it for a little while and released in 2021. And that confirmed that the building needs significant structural improvements to meet current earthquake codes. We also learned through that process that the building is deficient in many other ways. It's really at the end of its kind of useful life after 50 years of good service. And would need a complete renovation to continue to serve the community well into the future. So the final report concluded that the costs of such a renovation would be high enough and the construction schedule long enough that replacement of the building might also be considered. After all, replacement of the building, as Robin said, on an alternative site is really the only way to avoid a lengthy construction closure. During this same period, the Halpern Conservancy, led by a group of civic-minded property owners here with us today, launched a design competition to envision a renovated Keller Auditorium. They'll be able to describe that process to you. And that process led to the concept design that will be presented today and is a very compelling vision for what the building could become should the city ultimately decide to pursue renovation. Next slide, please. So to clarify, we currently have two parallel approaches going on for how to address the Keller's deficiencies. One is the comprehensive renovation concept that you're about to hear about in more detail, and the other is considering the possibility of a building replacement on an alternative site. The alternative site option would allow the existing building to be used during construction without impact on performances. To better understand the opportunities of alternative sites, the city launched a request for expressions of interest last summer to local developers and property owners to identify possible sites. We received 8 proposals and using a series of criteria, narrowed them down to 2 for future study. Those are a site on Southwest Lincoln Street owned by Portland State University and a portion of the Lloyd Center Mall site proposed by Urban Renaissance Development Company. Next slide, please. So what you can expect as we go forward, we don't want to spend years and years on this decision. We clearly have a lot of work to do after the decision gets made about a preferred path. So we need to kind of get there and continue moving. To try to get there, the city has authorized two $50,000 grants to help the proposers of the two finalist alternative site locations develop their concepts. That work is underway now and will be completed in the spring and is expected to be presented to City Council sometime in May. We anticipate presenting both new build and renovation options for public comment in the June timeframe and are aiming to get back to City Council for direction on a desired path forward this summer. It is important to note that the real work will begin after this decision is made. As you're likely aware, there is essentially no funding currently identified for what's expected to be a multi-$100-million project. And with that, I will turn it over to the folks from the Halpern Landscape Conservancy to present their exciting work on the renovation concept. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm John Russell, and I'm the first of 6 speakers today. I'll describe the origin of the project to provide context. I'll talk about the design competition, and then Tim Eddy of Hanna-Barbera Eddy will describe the results of some 18 months of effort to refine the plans. And then 3 public speakers will describe the reasons for their support, and Scott Andrews will close. I'm a passionate believer that our project that seamlessly includes the Halpern Fountain, that's shown best here, and the Stewfish design will become the icon of Portland, like the Space Needle, the Statue of Liberty, the Golden Gate Bridge, the Gateway Arch. Like they are symbols of the vitality of their cities. Now that's a very, very ambitious goal, and I never thought it was possible until I first saw this 7 years ago. No one ever dreamed that a Portland icon could be created. So let me tell you a little bit about my background, and then later on in my presentation I'll explain why it matters to give credibility to my comments. In my career, I've been an owner of 13 downtown Portland buildings, 5 of which, by the way, are masonry. Among them is a 30-story PacWest Center that the Wall Street Journal called one of the top 10 towers in America. I've owned my 20-story 200 Market building across the street from the Keller for 35 years in partnerships with Regents Blue Cross. The building is rated LEED Platinum, which, as you know, is the highest level of sustainability. And we believe that we were the first LEED building in America to become LEED rated. So that's my private. My public career includes memberships in the Portland Landmark Commission, president-elect of the Portland Planning Commission, chair for a decade of the Mayor's Business Roundtable. I chaired the Portland Development Commission, the predecessor for Prosper Portland. Excuse me, I served for 8 years as a member of the Oregon Transportation Commission, and I just retired after chairing the $90 billion Oregon Investment Council, succeeding Rick Adams. So I've been asked to describe the origins of the project. It began 6 or 7 years ago with a gathering of the neighbors of my 200 Market building to brainstorm. This is like a neighborhood improvement project, to brainstorm how we could improve our neighborhood. PSU is an important member, probably the most important, with 45 blocks. St. Mary's, the Mark family, the Goodman family, the Saltzman family, Jordan Schnitzer, as well as Carlisle's predecessor representing the owner of the Keller, and of course Robin Williams is the operator of the Keller. Our group focused only on the exterior of the Keller. There's no hint on the outside of the building of the magic that's inside. And in fact, 3 of the 4 sides are blank and thus violate the city's requirement for a vital pedestrian experience. We hired Don Stastny, the global guru of design competitions. We don't hold it against him that he lives here, but he's done the Berlin Embassy and so on. And Stastny suggested a dozen names. Our jury narrowed it down to 4, and we gave $10,000 each to give us a sense of what was possible with the exterior of the building. The first 3 submittals were good and workmanlike, just like we expected. And then the 4th, this was so stunning that we actually have taken these boards These are the original boards that we got 7 years ago from Stewfish. That's all we got. No verbiage, nothing, just these boards. We took them to city council, we took them to your council, the TriMet board, county commission, all to rave reviews. At this point, Carl Lyle's predecessor told us that we should stop work, as Carl has described. She commissioned a $400,000 seismic study that took 2 years and was subsequently found to be seriously flawed. I'm happy to answer questions about that. I am an engineer. You can't be in my business without knowing seismic capabilities in some detail. Our group then reconvened and combined with the Halpern Landscape Conservancy. This is after the city's work. With $200,000 of your money, $200,000 of the city's money, about $400,000 of our philanthropic money, we hired Hannah Berry Eddy, and you'll hear from Tim Eddy, and together we assembled a dream team of professionals. Tim will describe their result. In order to evaluate our team's work, it's now necessary, as Carl has described, to compare our project to future competitive proposals from the Lloyd Center and PSU. In terms of the Lloyd Center, the owner of the abandoned Lloyd Center is KKR, the giant private equity firm worth billions. Bear in mind that KKR didn't intentionally purchase the abandoned mall. Instead, it lent money to the prior owner who then defaulted. So it's what we call a reluctant owner. But I know and admire KKR. When I served on the investment council, KKR was probably our biggest investment in billions. Did we invest in KKR because they promised to develop iconic real estate? No. They would tell you they're mercenaries. Their MO is to buy low, make changes, sell high, and move on to the next fund. In terms of PSU, they own a 4-acre site at the extreme south end of its properties. The site is basically isolated and has none of the hotels, the parking spaces, the restaurants, and the public spaces that are necessary to make an exciting and successful performance center. And a performance center, I'm talking about in the extreme, like Times Square, even Las Vegas. That's what it takes to make a whole performing arts center. In the case of PSU's property, 2 of its 4 sides are a freeway off-ramp. The 3rd side is a light rail line. The 4th side faces a condominium tower whose homeowners have endorsed our project. Let me close by talking about the potential for our project to be an icon, a symbol, a brand for our region. And this is my passion. It's a conviction that drives me since I first saw these 2 boards, particularly this one, because this view is across the existing forecourt fountain toward the Keller. The ingredients of an icon like the Space Needle and the arch require 3 components. Our 2-acre site already has a genius designer in Lawrence Halpern, who designed the forecourt fountain. Now, Halpern is not a household name, but he should be. You may know that there are now 4 presidential monuments on the mall: Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln. Halpern was selected to do the 4th, Roosevelt. I mean, that's the stature of the genius behind the forecourt fountain. And the forecourt fountain is considered by many people to be his best work. The New York Times called his forecourt fountain the best thing since the Renaissance. So in terms of an ingredient for an icon, you couldn't ask for anything better than the forecourt fountain. But in its current state, it sits forlornly across 3rd Avenue. In order to make the total side of the 2, and Tim will describe what we've done to combine them. We've corrected that problem. So that's one of the 2 geniuses. The other genius is Stewfish, and it's a London-based firm that came to us through Michael Curry. Again, you don't hold it against Michael Curry that he lives on Mount Tabor, but he spends all of his time in Las Vegas or New York. He's the set designer for Lion King. Stastny knew him, and Curry knew Stewfish. So that's how we happened to be lucky enough to get them. All Stewfish, and Tim would tell you that Stewfish is not an architectural firm, they're designers. And all they do is design performance buildings all around the globe. They get it, they understand the ingredients. But bear in mind, for the competition, we only asked for a design for the exterior that would convey the excitement inside. So an icon needs to be public. I mean, I think selfishly that my PacBus Center could be an icon. It can't be. It's private. All the things that I mentioned, the art, Golden Gate, statue, they're all public. And what public in this case means two things. One, though all of those were commissioned by public bodies like your body, elected officials. So it was a conviction of the society that those things would be created. But I think even more important than the commission of the project is the fact that an icon needs to be used by the public. Drive across the Golden Gate. You get tours for the arch. You can eat restaurants on the top of the Space Needle. In the case of Keller, a lot of people have been given their high school diplomas there. And the Keller is essentially an egalitarian facility. You know, we went to the opening of Lion King. I'm wearing blue jeans. There are more people in every stripe, color, whatever at the thing. It was just, the Keller is by its nature, particularly with Broadway, it's an egalitarian experience. And I think the question you have to ask is, can Lloyd and PSU produce an icon of that statue? And I just don't think there's a prayer. Remember that one needs three components: a genius designer and a team, and I think an exceptional client. And I think Tim will describe what we've been able to do that demonstrates that we do have an exceptional client with a credible track record and an exceptional site. We believe that we have all three. The next speaker is Tim Eddy.
Oh, thanks, John. Good afternoon, councilors. I'm Tim Eddy, president of Henneberry Eddy Architects. Our firm is responsible for the design and technical team for the feasibility analysis for rebuilding and expanding the Keller Auditorium. When we were asked to lead the design team to advance the Stewfish concept for the 21st century Keller, we enthusiastically accepted. And I want to differ with John on one thing. The Stewfish team are a bunch of really great architects. They're really, really creative folks. And, you know, their work, however, exists with Madonna and Beyonce and, you know, great stage programs and so forth largely. And they're a really, really fine collaborator. But the main reason we took this on is that it's an outstanding concept and an exceptional fit for Portland. The combination of the expanded Keller and the forecourt fountain will bring much more than the sum of its parts to our community. It's the only option being considered that's in the core of downtown, and it's achievable, and it's achievable building block in Portland's Renaissance. This is a very unique site. It's got very special physical circumstances, a unique history, and urban assets that can't be replaced by a new facility anywhere. Next slide, please. Actually, next slide. And we can go to the next slide. Sorry. Keller, as Carl had mentioned, has served the greater Portland, well, I guess maybe it was Robin, greater Portland region for more than 100 years. It's a venue for concerts, theater performances, presidential speeches, high school graduations, and much more. We all kind of have a history with it. It's the largest theatrical auditorium in Oregon, and it's the only theater in the Portland area capable of hosting these big shows, the Broadway performances and large operas and ballet productions. Next slide, please. It was first built in 1917, substantially modernized in 1967, and after the past 5.5 decades of service, this City of Portland asset is really due to be reinvented.
Tim, if I may, in 1967, it had to get a city building permit. It passed the seismic code in effect in 1967. So it's not an unreinforced masonry building.
Well, it did. So next slide, please. So the purpose of our effort is to revitalize, rehabilitate, and expand the Keller into a 21st century, state-of-the-art, world-class performing arts venue while realizing the benefits of its centralized location, surrounding infrastructure, existing structure and materials, and its potential to energize the neighborhood and take better advantage of its physical relationship to the fountain than it currently does across the street. This design turns the auditorium inside out with interactive programming and the potential for many, many things. Next slide. In working towards this exceptional concept, our team completed a comprehensive 8-month multidisciplinary feasibility study for rehabilitating and expanding the building. The effort included programming, architectural design, structural and soils engineering, urban design, construction cost estimating, and scheduling. This in-depth analysis utilized soils information and structural testing of existing reinforced concrete and brick masonry walls within the existing structure that was not available when the city commissioned the seismic study that they did. This report, created as part of the work that we've done, should be considered a reliable guide for redevelopment of the facility and should be considered to be fully supersede the prior structural studies commissioned 2018 through 2020. We very much believe that the revitalized Keller can become a Portland icon and catalyze the neighborhood, but we've also taken to heart the essential life safety, functionality, and visitor experience deficits voiced by the building's users and operators. We want to be clear that all of these things have been addressed by the team in the concept design, beginning with comprehensive seismic retrofit strategy that will bring the Keller fully into compliance with current code for new buildings, and thus ensure the protection for the crew, the cast, the public, and preserve the asset in the event of a significant earthquake. The result will be an uncompromised performance venue on par with a new facility anywhere of its type in the country. Next slide. With the vision established by Stu Fish as a starting point, the design team facilitated an inclusive process that prioritized the needs of the auditorium's users. Over the course of multiple workshops, we gathered input from Broadway Across America, Oregon Ballet Theater, Portland Opera, and the Portland Five, and used it to establish goals and develop solutions. Through these workshops, key themes emerged: safety and accessibility, improved visitor experience and brand experience, and operational efficiency. The proposed concept addresses each of these. Next slide. Loading and back-of-house inadequacies are main concerns of the existing facility. Our concept includes expansion of the building to the east to accommodate a code-compliant and proper loading facility, reconstructed dressing rooms, additional rehearsal space, and other backstage program areas requested by the user groups. Next slide, please. The design embraces a robust inclusivity inherent to universal accessibility. If everybody's familiar with universal accessibility, it means everybody uses the same front door, and full compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, welcoming everyone universally and equally to the site, interior, public, and back-of-house spaces. Next slide, please. The concept the concept recrafts the auditorium itself. We raise the stage elevation, we restructure and expand the orchestra pit, construct a new orchestra seating level over the existing level to maintain superior sight lines and equitably distribute accessible seating throughout the auditorium. Adding new box seating, widening circulation aisles, and installing new seating throughout. The redesign also includes replacing all finishes, all lighting, new physical acoustical treatments, along with adding electronic sound enhancement system to accommodate a wider range of artist demands. Next slide, please. The primary move of the Stu Fish Curry concept is a dramatic curving sloped glass curtain wall addition to the west, which embraces and directs views towards the Keller Fountain and creates the effect of a vibrant urban room. This front of house expansion creates new public lobby space commensurate with the scale of the auditorium. Everybody here's been in the Keller and realized that there's not enough space in the front of house. So this creates new space, larger space, and actively engages the Keller Fountain. Next slide, please. New building also addresses the frontages on Clay and Market Streets to convey the art and activity that thrives inside the building by taking advantage of the recesses on those sides of the building. Next slide, please. Importantly, the expansion of the front of house spaces accommodates expanded restrooms, proper concession spaces, space for private gathering, and a full-service restaurant overlooking the fountain. All of these features are sized to the full capacity of the building, and a generous open public stair connects all three levels of the front of house. So there's a fair amount of drama within the building that currently, that wasn't built in 1967 in this approach. Next slide, please. We performed a technical analysis of closing the block of Southwest 3rd Avenue between Clay and Market to regular vehicular traffic to create an urban plaza connecting the auditorium and the fountain. So in this slide, the auditorium is at the top of the slide and the fountain is at the bottom. As you can see, it's one space, not interrupted by traffic. Reinventing the Keller is much more than just, it's about much more than just the building. It's about creating an exciting interactive destination that brings people closer together for art, cultural events, and a sense of community. The programmable plaza provides an opportunity for performing arts groups to engage a broad, diverse group of citizens. Next slide, please. For fans of the Portland Winter Light Festival, which has been a rousing success over the weekend. This project will include programmable projection mapping on the fountain and the plaza. If you're familiar with that is, it's basically we're able to project from that giant curving wall any images, video, whatever on the fountain, on the water, and on the plaza. This interactive feature is one of the most exciting elements of the project. It'll attract the public to the area, to the restaurant, to the bar, to the plaza, even on evenings when the theater is dark. Theater performances can be shared at the fountain and the plaza, really turning the theater inside out. Creating a 21st century Keller is the most impactful option for the city and the region. It'll have ripple effects on urban vitality and pedestrian activity throughout the district. Moving the Keller's operations to a new location would exact an incalculable opportunity cost, depriving our city's cultural district of reinvestment, excitement, and urban placemaking at a time when we need it the most. Next slide, please. Reusing the existing auditorium is the most sustainable option. Aligning with Metro's goals of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and eliminating waste, the rehabilitation project preserves most of the embodied carbon in the concrete, masonry, and steel of the existing structure, providing for a carbon-efficient facility. And we can dive into that in more detail, but the carbon investment in a new building in terms of the concrete and steel is just, it's massive. Next slide, please. We recognize the importance of advancing the equity, inclusion, and community engagement process to ensure that the 21st Century Keller is welcoming and inclusive for all Portlanders and visitors. Engaging the community and creating an equitable process and final design through Metro's goals and those of the City of Portland is a critical next step. Our team has been conducting pop-up events and a speaker series and inviting neighbors and diverse community groups to shape the vision for a new destination and explore possibilities related to the new plaza. So we're trying not to get too far ahead here, but it's hard not to. We hope to get the city's endorsement to conduct a design advice request with the Portland Design Commission to obtain feedback on the concept's contribution to the urban realm and to provide certainty to the City Council that the project will easily advance through the formal review process when that time comes. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, this is not only a new performing arts venue, it's a 21st century urban vision for downtown Portland. It will be a new destination and an icon in Portland. Thanks, and next slide.
Good afternoon, councilors and chair. I'm Brian Farisa, director of the Portland Art Museum. I'm here to speak in support of the reinvestment in the Keller Auditorium and the vision that has evolved into a new destination that strengthens the connection to the Keller Fountain and develops a new programmable plaza. My personal perspective is based on my background as an artist, historian, economist, an arts leader working in Newark, Chicago, Milwaukee, and Tulsa prior to my 17 years here in Portland. I feel strongly that now is the time for our community to not only address urgent social needs and issues, but to also provide a sense of hope and connectivity through the arts, which bridge time and place and help us all learn from diverse cultures locally and globally. The economic case is clear. Downtowns are the economic heart of a city, and cities are the economic driver for a state and region. Cities that are diversified in office space, housing, education, and cultural institutions are returning to post-pandemic foot traffic levels or exceeding them. It was when I was working in Newark at the Newark Museum of Art in the 1990s that I witnessed firsthand the power and impact of a performance venue to transform a city. The development of the New Jersey Performing Arts Center in downtown Newark was a $100 million plus investment by the public sector and private citizens. It served as the cornerstone of New Jersey's largest city's revitalization when it was most needed. The project has become an inclusive institution that links indoor and outdoor spaces, is a leader in arts education, a convener of civic engagement, and a catalyst for development. Annually, known as NJPAC, it generates over $46 million a year for the state of New Jersey and has spurred more than $240 million in adjacent development projects. History also guides us in this conversation. As we know, our country's 19th century Midwest Rust Belt cities of Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and Detroit, among others, faced an urgency to evolve during the 20th century to new economies. Interestingly, it was the museums, the symphonies that served as the anchors of economic and inspirational stimulus for these cities' renaissance. Here in Portland, we are fortunate to have a strong city plan with a cohesive cultural district that includes the museum, Schnitzer Hall, Oregon Historical Society, and the Keller, to name a few. They contribute to a critical mass that can serve as the foundation for our rebuilding. The parts are here, but they need to be cared for and invested in. Ultimately, and more importantly than solely economics, the human case is also clear for a renewed Keller. The arts in its many forms connect us, help us understand and appreciate diverse views and perspectives, and foster and strengthen empathy, something that I believe is needed now more than ever. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I am guided to say next slide.
Thank you for this opportunity, councilors and chair. My name is Shane Jewell. I'm the executive director of Oregon Ballet Theater. to understand my perspective a little bit, I have worked and lived through both options being currently discussed. In 2001, I worked for a Broadway company when we had to go through the remodel and reopening of the Civic Center Music Hall in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and then was the executive director of Orlando Ballet when we navigated the reopening of a brand new, the opening of a new facility in 2020 at Dr. Phillips Center. Each had their unique ramifications, both positive and negative. I am pleased that we have been invited to participate in the Keller Restoration Feasibility Study. At multiple stages in the process, our team was brought in for input as to how the restoration would work, not only with our performance needs on stage and backstage, but our customer service and audience engagement needs throughout the facility. It's important to understand there's a direct correlation to our success in the quality and amenities of our main performing arts venue. So it's wonderful to feel our voices, needs, wish list, concerns were heard and addressed. This has not always been the case in my experience, and that oversight led to modifications and additions that were needed on the back end of opening a new facility, a timely and costly lesson for all involved. I feel this report was created with the utmost care and attention to detail. There are several aspects of this report we find very exciting. The new programmable plaza as a place to preview our shows or use projection mapping to increase exposure sounds truly remarkable. In a time where the arts industry is seeking to greatly enhance the experience of attending performances, this feature could go a long way towards that goal. In addition, the newly designed large lobby areas where we would have ample space not only for our guests to congregate in comfort, but adds to our revenue streams by being able to more strategically activate the lobby for development, school enrollment, and merchandise. Also, the reworking of the loading dock and the ability to pull semis directly into the docking area without blocking the street are especially intriguing. Of course, there's much to be considered with a project of this scope. During my last experience with a PAC remodel, we were forced to move to a smaller venue during the construction phase. While it did affect our ability to do business, we were made whole by the city support through the seasons we were relocated, and the response from our audiences upon the reopening of a new facility was transformative for the organization. In summation, I'd like to express my appreciation for the good thinking of this report, the thoughtful outreach to OBT as a primary user, and the opportunity to testify. I hope we can continue to have a voice in this process as it proceeds. It is of the utmost importance to the ballet, as well as the future of the arts and culture in this community. Thank you. Next slide, please.
Good morning, President Peterson and Metro Councilors. I'm Diana Stewart. I live in the River Place community, and I am a member of the Downtown Neighborhood Association Board. I'm speaking today on behalf of the board, which has officially and enthusiastically adopted this proposal for the 21st Century Keller Auditorium. The DNA's 500-plus members live, work, run businesses, and study in the downtown, the core of the city. We have not deserted Portland, but rather are still fighting for the city we love and want to see come back to life. The downtown needs wins now, not in 10 or 15 years when these other proposals would come to fruition, but sooner, now. The Halpern sequence has always been Portland's chain of park gems. This exciting restored and expanded Keller will seamlessly flow to the forecourt fountain as a sparkling setting for all of those park gems. Imagine the impact on Portland and the forecourt fountain if another proposal is adopted and the Keller goes dark. Rather, this project restores and expands all three layers of the theater, creates a new plaza, and introduces new interactive programming between the theater, the forecourt fountain, and the plaza. Adopting and immediately beginning this project is an important symbol to the state, the region, the country, and the world that Portland is coming back stronger than ever. The thrilling design of this proposal is ready. Problems that have previously been raised have been refuted. The infrastructure of the Keller, public transit, easy street access for bicycles, pedestrians, cars, parking, hotel rooms, restaurants, easy access to freeways, all are here and ready to go. For the DNA, this proposal is a win-win-win for our beloved city. This stunning transformation of the Keller will have a catalytic impact on the downtown and the greater Portland region. This modernization plan with planned programming of the expanded exterior spaces will transform the district into a destination not only during the day, but also evenings throughout the year rather than just around performance times. The DNA urges you to support this exciting proposal as the win the downtown needs now. Thank you very much. Next slide.
Thank you. I'm Scott Andrews. I'm principal at Melvin Mark Companies. June will be the beginning of my 46th year. I've seen a lot of changes in downtown Portland in 46 years. Why rebuild Keller? Well, it's the right thing to do. Notwithstanding the statement by PSU that they're building the future of Portland, not restoring the past. In Portland, we don't demolish 100-year-old historic buildings, we restore them. The most sustainable building is the one you save and rehabilitate, and this is much more than a restoration. It's the creation of a new regional programmable destination. The Fountain District was literally built around the auditorium. The world-renowned Halpern sequence begins with the Keller Fountain and was specifically designed to be across from this important regional facility. Closing the Keller is not a reasonable thing to do. Next slide. The Keller is in the heart of downtown, and the neighborhood includes all of the infrastructure needed for an auditorium of this size. There are 2,700 four-star hotel rooms within a 10-minute walk, 4,500 off-street parking stalls within a 5-minute walk of the front door, 4 blocks of streetcar, 4 blocks to light rail, and less than 10 blocks in multiple directions to your choice of freeways heading north, south, east, and west. There are many great restaurants and bars close by, making meeting and eating before and after easy and convenient. The alternative sites being considered aren't as easy to access and will never match these resources. These assets are irreplaceable. A 21st century Keller Auditorium will leverage downtown Portland and is essential to the downtown's renaissance. Next slide. The estimated construction and soft costs to complete the construction effort in 19 months, and yes, 19 months, not multiple years, are approximately $267 million, presuming a 2027 start. This is a little more than half of the estimated cost to construct a new facility, including some structured parking. This does not include the cost of land or additional program space beyond what the reinvented Keller will provide. Additionally, the 500-car structure planned as part of the alternative site at PSU is not adequate for the large events currently staged at the Keller and is fully inadequate if there are other events taking place in that neighborhood at the same time. A new structure will take years longer, and a lot can happen during that delay. Increased costs, economic problems, and changes in the political environment, to name a few. During the 19-month closure, alternative locations are available for both opera and ballet. However, due to other impacts, we believe a subsidy is appropriate to add to the project budget. The Broadway Across America performances would necessarily need to consider smaller productions to use other performance locations. We have learned and have asked to be advised at how other cities have handled these adjustments. An ideal solution would be to maintain the performances of the Broadway series, the opera, and the ballet. However, we know there will be disruption, and we strongly believe in a recommended subsidy for Portland 5, opera and ballet, and Broadway business interruptions. Next slide. In conclusion, Keller is a key piece of the Portland arts and culture neighborhood. It's blocks from Lincoln Hall, the Schnitz, Winningstad, Art Museum, and OHS. None of the other sites being considered are in the core of downtown, and none will create a true destination location. If the historic and cultural aspects of the Keller, combined with its setting in the core in downtown, weren't compelling enough reasons to rehabilitate and expand it, it's far less expensive, faster, more sustainable to do so than to build a replacement facility elsewhere. With respect to adding more performing art spaces in Portland, especially in or downtown, in the future, we enthusiastically say yes, just not at the expense of Keller, and not beforehand. The Keller project's ready to go. It can be funded and built far quicker. There's tremendous support for the Keller, not only the neighborhood business, but by thousands of people living in the district, as well as the neighborhood associations. By supporting Keller, you're making a statement that you believe in the future of the city. As John said, the Stewfish design will become an icon for Portland. We're ready to build Portland's icon. Thank you. and more than willing to take questions for any and all of us.
Thank you. The disembodied voice from above, apologies that I could not be in attendance today, but you are in good hands. Counselors, first of all, thank you to our presenters and counselors' questions. I see Counselor Lewis.
Sure, thank you so much. Thank you to the whole panel for being here today. Thank you in particular to John. You have held this together. We first talked about it about 6 years ago, and you held it together through a pandemic and a massive change in your business operations that speaks to your public service. We'll even forgive you for your time on the OTC. Metro inside joke.
It's called a learning experience.
It is a learning experience. But what you have shown to us today is tremendous. I want to look at these boards and then the conversation that we're having now and make sure that we're not seeing this as a facelift, but actually entire reconstructive surgery. As the agency in charge of helping make sure that these venues are usable, I'm delighted to have seen slides that reference the things that are really important to us: the public space, the access, the ability to have more concessions, bars, restaurants. That helps the business model work and helps reduce the cost to operate and frankly helps subsidize our performing arts partners. Restrooms, restrooms, restrooms. You said it once, I'm gonna say it like 10 times. The number of seats needs to be proportionate to restrooms. This is not the appropriate venue to dig in, but that's the level at which we need to make sure this works. Loading. We saw the diagram, want to make sure it's going to not only meet our current needs, but any potential future needs. At the end of the day, we have to bet on downtown right now. It is the only option. For me, Lloyd, we're here. It's a non-starter. We are going to see downtown come back not only as the place people come to when they come to Portland, but the place that Portlanders gather, meet each other. It's a cultural hub, it's a cuisine hub, and it's an arts hub. So I think it's perfectly appropriate to continue to study the PSU site, but in terms of iconic and standout, we have something here. I'm fully supportive of the process that was outlined with the feedback into the summer. The spring and summer will be an important time to really hear from all users. And I want to make sure that we're hearing how hard the transition and the construction period can be. So my enthusiasm today is not tempered by that, but I am cognizant that we're going to look at a couple of years that are going to be hard for us as the operator. It's going to be hard for the performing arts that are used to using this space. And we're going to have to do a lot to maintain and retain audiences who are used to coming to the Keller. I want to celebrate the engagement with the neighborhood as placemaking. A lot of folks use that word interchangeably with placekeeping. And I just want to respect the history of this space. And we have an opportunity here to continue to lift that up. Not only the history of the venue, but the history of the neighborhood. So thank you for being here today. I'm just enthusiastic.
I would like to add that we owe a debt of gratitude for Nancy Stranning and Steve Falstick of your staff. Nancy was, I think, at virtually every one of the meetings as all these details were worked out. And there's 4 times as many women's restrooms as currently exists.
Wonderful. Well, we'll keep pushing on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Simpson, then Huang, then Nolan.
Thank you, President Peterson. Thank you for sharing this vision with us. If you know anything about PSU urban studies or placemaking classes, you know about the Halpern sequence because they tell us to go out there all the time.
Huh.
Think about visioning. And this is a wonderful way to activate that space, really digging into Patrick Condon's idea around sustainable communities and using what we have and building upon it. I want to echo some thoughts that Councilor Lewis shared around. This isn't an uplift. This is a major investment and a landmark here in our community that we have to continue to uplift. Given its proximity to all of those great things that you outlined, I mean, it's a no-brainer, considering the financial analysis that you put behind this and the cost. Like, I want to go back to that slide, that the cost to just really go in and update. Again, it's time for it. I mean, the last one was in '67. I think it's worthwhile. You have my support moving forward with this design and this process because, I mean, you won't be able to replicate this anywhere else. You won't be able, I mean, to build out all of those great things in terms of transit connection, pedestrian access, parks, uplifting, and also it can be built into Winter Festival, Lights Festival. I mean, it's a no-brainer. So thank you for your work on this. I hope that you, as you're thinking about this, I saw Hoffman Construction as the GC on that, but I really think about our co-bid firms and DMWSB firms. I want to make sure that they are a part of this conversation in terms of getting this built, because sometimes it is always about the economics, but if you talk to anybody who has built the bones of this city that is a person of color, they have pride in the work that they have done in shaping this region and building out the city view that we see. So I want to make sure we continue to involve communities of color in building up our communities. Thank you.
Thank
No,
you.
I will say, Hoffman was necessary for us in the whole process, but they know that they're not necessarily going to be the contractor when it's built. It's just that we needed some assurance about costs and so on in the process. And in my time on the Transportation Commission, I actually forced ODOT to come to grips with the fact that we didn't have adequate minority representation in the contracting, so I'll take some credit for that. It's a learning experience, being on the Transportation Commission.
Absolutely. I just want to make sure we're part of the buildup, not just the show, because that's oftentimes where we end up is on the entertainment side. But I want us on the economic building side as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
You gave me an opportunity to bring up one thing that I didn't, and I hadn't thought about it. We have hired the firm of CCS, which was the advisor to the Portland Art Museum's capital campaign, where they've raised over $130 million of private funding to do the connection. It's all private money. And they are very sure that we can raise between $50 and $100 million privately for restoration of the Keller.
And I'm old enough to remember that every single thing that we value always involved the private sector in some role, either pushing philanthropy or something. It was the magic, and I think Portland is known for that, the public-private partnership.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Huang and then Nolan.
Oh, thank you, Madam President, and I just want to thank the whole panel for all your work and your presentation. It's truly an inspirational thing to see. And I think my question is really kind of on some of the economics. Mr. Russell, I was really struck by your comment about the Keller being egalitarian and accessible for communities all around our region. And I don't know if you've gotten to this point yet in kind of like developing the financial model, but I'm wondering, post-construction, would there be an impact on potentially ticket prices or fees that, a lot of our performing arts partners would pay that, would kind of have a dampening effect on accessibility or, on some of our nonprofit partners from being able to use that space? So just wondering if you might talk through like how we can continue to keep this accessible and egalitarian.
Well, we're not the experts in terms of the running, but I think that the fees that the users pay are really based on operational costs, and they're not a function of the cost of the building itself. We would fully expect that there would be some sort of bonding done for the proportion that we could not raise on a public basis. And we recognize that with the subsidies that are going to be necessary to take care of our cultural folks in the Portland Five, you're probably closer to $290 million than 260. But nonetheless, it's still $250 million less than an alternative. So I think that the impact is minimal, at least with regard to comparing one option to the other.
So you're saying most likely the costs wouldn't be passed on directly to consumers, but we as a public would provide the subsidies to make it work. Is that kind of what
Well,
you're
it is,
hoping for?
it's, the facility is owned by the city of Portland, right?
Right. Thank you.
All right, Counselor Nolan.
Thanks, Madam President. Thanks. This is pretty fun. I adore downtown. I represent downtown Portland here in this room. And I also have not given up on downtown. I agree with several of you who've said that downtown as a core needs to have vitality and economic strength for the region as a whole to come along with that. It's a little bit of a give and take. The outer parts of the region also contribute to the art scene as well as economic prosperity, but central cities are important to me. And as I'm enthusiastic about this, I want to dig a little deeper into the other two alternatives before I cast my lot. Some of my colleagues have jumped ahead of me. Maybe they've done more research than I have, but we haven't had this presentation from the other two options. And as enthusiastic as I am, I rarely commit until I've seen all the possibilities. I have a couple of questions, if I might, and Mr. Russell, I'm not sure if to address them to you or to the rest of your panel, you decide. You talked a bit about the entire community benefiting from access to the reimagined Keller, as well as engaged in the construction of it. I'd like to know how much your group has involved the entire community, and particularly leaders in the BIPOC community, in the concept, in some of these designs, in the imagining of it. If we are aiming for an icon for the entire region, it should be envisioned by people who don't necessarily look like us, but maybe look like the rest of the region. So tell me how you've incorporated that.
Commissioner Nolan, I just knew that when a question came from you, it would be an impossible thing to answer. I guess the answer is that the Keller is unique in the fact that it just is by its nature egalitarian in terms of its use. And, you know, that what happens inside is a function of the demand as it changes over time. What groups want to be part of performances in the Keller? And that's a little bit hard to predict. But as it exists, the Keller is by its nature egalitarian. And I think all of us involved in this have a greater sense of equity and so on than we appear to have. Is that a fair statement?
And in terms of,
What I'm hearing is an understanding of the question, and I will impute into that, maybe tell me if I'm going too far ahead of you, a commitment to improve how you do that.
Yes, absolutely, and it's something that we have worked with your staff and the city staff on, and that is a given. That is the next phase of what we're doing.
the design is not finished. And part of the ongoing process would be to do just exactly what you have suggested. We're already and willing. I'm making 2 or 3 presentations a week to neighborhood groups, local folks, anybody who's interested, and we'd be happy to get together with anybody that you thought it would be helpful to do so. But we have
Mr.
been
Andrews,
working
I'm
with
talking about iconic, nationally and globally known BIPOC designers.
Interesting.
Can I say, as far as the community, it just doesn't quite answer your question, but the Downtown Neighborhood Association Board is BIPOC. We're diverse in age, economic background, and we want to be that way and sort of seek out those kinds of folks who will join us. And the project came to us last year, and we learned a lot about it, got presentations on it, decided we wanted to support it, and spoke in front of City Council on behalf of it in the fall. So we do have people don't realize this about the downtown, but the downtown is very economically diverse, lots of different communities from different areas. And so I think there's that element that before the presentation was made to the city, they sort of did a rough run with us to see what our reactions might be. And we're on board. We want to support it and sort of help it happen.
And that's exciting. And we don't need to struggle here in this moment, but one of Metro's defining values is racial equity.
Right.
And we collectively expect to see that at all levels and stages and aspects of programs. I'm just letting you know that and telling you that it's important to me as one of the counselors.
I would urge you to take a look at the website of Stu Fish. I don't think you'll find a white male in the body. And they're not black, they're not brown. The person that we have most of our dealings with at Stu Fish is, I'm not sure exactly. You check, or I don't know. But
That's good.
Yeah.
I'd also add, Councilor Nolan, the landscape architecture for this project is exceptionally important in terms of how the Keller Fountain and the auditorium are integrated as a one thing. And Place Landscape Architects, one of the preeminent co-bid landscape architectural firms in the country, is located here in Portland, and they're deeply involved in the project and are, from an urban design perspective, probably the most important design partner on the team. So, you know, all projects evolve, and we address, inclusion in our design teams for everything that we do. And as this project moves to the next step, it's another opportunity to involve more high-level design from co-bid firms and others. So
That would be encouraging. That would be fabulous.
We're exceptionally conscious of that.
Pivoting just a bit, if I might, Madam President, you mentioned subsidies for the big boys and girls. And I'm a fan of the major companies in Portland. My husband and I have held season tickets to the symphony for almost as long as you've been in the business, Mr. Andrews. So it's not that I think they aren't deserving. But I also have served on the boards of 2 theaters that are local, small, community-led, including BIPOC-led. I didn't hear mention of support for them either in the dark period or on an ongoing basis to assure that Portlanders, people within the region, have access to that kind of performing shows and companies as the ballet, the opera, the symphony.
Well, we believe that the cost to mitigate the problems that are caused by a 19-month closure could easily be taken care of, again, for a number that's minuscule relative to the cost of building another building. So we have focused on the organizations that were the major users. Those are the ones that we could get information from and get a feel for, how big is this bag? But there are other users of the facility that might also need some help. But again, I think that they could be included at a very reasonable cost.
I agree, and I just want to put it front and center so that we are all thinking about all the users and all the audiences in particular. Final question, Madam President, continues the conversation about funding. Are you envisioning building this with bond, general obligation bonds, operating revenues?
This is,
Where's that money coming from?
it's a city-owned facility. We started this process in terms of just taking a look at the exterior to see what could happen to this, and now we've gotten involved in one of the three alternatives. So I'm not sure that we're the right people to ask. We know what
Fair
the
enough.
costs are, but, and we're willing to provide private funding, and we've already hired a firm to start that process. But yeah, it's a public, we expect it to remain a publicly owned facility, a city-owned facility. And so we would expect that the city would make an investment in this location.
Not to say that we don't have our eye on potential sources of funds, but it's
Of course
not,
you do, John, Mr. Russell.
it's just not, it's beyond our scope. But
Fair enough.
it would-
And cost shouldn't be an impossible obstacle, but awareness of cost and how that will happen and what engagement needs to happen for people to be enthusiastic enough about this, as I am and as others here are, is important to actually realize the dream.
Not surprisingly, you're way ahead of us.
Thanks.
To your credit.
Thanks, Madam President.
Thank you. I'm going to take a moment here and ask Carl, as the External Partnerships and Programs Manager with the City of Portland, just to, you gave us a very, very high-level overview, and I guess I have some questions about Metro's participation and how you will be evaluating the different scenarios. So as I listen to this, and Carl, maybe you've done way more work than I'm aware of, but have you gone through a values and outcomes statement of what the City of Portland hopes to achieve out of a project? And the reason I ask that is several reasons. One, I'm not sure what you're going to be using as an evaluation performance metric matrix, and how you're going to be involving the community in the creation of those values and outcomes so that there's ownership at the end and a decision, whether it's to renovate on site or to move. There are benefits and costs, and how transparent that decision is going to be, I think, is dependent upon the process that you lay out, and also the value that the fountain has, as well as that piece of property, whether Keller is there or not, should be, I think, part of the discussion. Because what I'm hearing is an angst about what would happen if it went away for this neighborhood, this core of downtown. You know, what are we trying to achieve in totality, not in just the Keller? Because the minute you touch this, right, there is a system of arts and culture. There is a placemaking of downtown. There is an economic impact to the movement, the placement, the location. And while it is not up to Metro Council to make that decision, we are obviously a partner in that. And so I'd like to hear your response to that. And then I have some follow-up.
Okay, thank you. I think I heard several questions or comments in that. One that stood out for me was what's Metro's role, and I think the city is happy to partner with Metro as much as Metro would like to be in that conversation with us. I mean, that we have a longstanding partnership on the operations and ownership of these buildings, and I think it's been successful. There's some new pressures on that relationship, you know, that have grown over time and need to be addressed, but I think this, from the city's perspective, we absolutely want to continue to work with Metro leadership and staff and Portland 5, obviously, on solving and working through those things. So that's one piece. There were some questions about what does meaningful outreach and engagement really look like on this, and how does that get developed? And I think, we are, I'll be completely honest, kind of making this process up as we go, right? This isn't something we do a lot of, but we're also trying to be very thoughtful about it and include, stakeholders to the extent that we can without developing a 10-year process. We don't want to do that either, right? We need to keep moving. We need to be thoughtful about resources and time, but also make sure that we're inviting those with thoughts and opinions to the table. So to that end, we're working with the new site teams now. They're just getting started. We have a great understanding of the possibilities, I think, now due to this work, generously funded by the city and Metro and private donations for what a renovation could look like. We need to bring those other concepts up a little bit, and we're in conversations currently with the city's outreach and communications and equity professionals to talk about how to get the most out of a pretty confined and targeted outreach period that's, perhaps only a month or two long. Once we have this information kind of ready, how do we make that meaningful? And we've also included Metro staff and Portland 5 staff in those conversations to the extent that they're available. So we don't have that plan yet, but there are definitely talks going on about it, and we know that it'll be very important. So those were a couple of things I heard. Another theme that you mentioned, and absolutely correctly, is the importance of the current site. I think that should there be interest in getting more serious about one of these alternative locations for an actual Keller replacement, and that's an unknown at this point. Absolutely, the city does control the current Keller site, and I think there's widespread recognition that whatever happens there has to be something really special. It's a really important site within the city. Its relationship to the Keller Fountain, the forecourt fountain, is really unique. And it's not something that I don't think the community or the city or Metro, not to speak for Metro, would be interested in just sort of selling off to the highest bidder and seeing an apartment building built there. Like it needs to be more than that. It's a very important site. So I think that is something I've heard from lots of different stakeholders as we've had this conversation. What did I miss?
Thank you. Thank you. I'll just encourage you to get a little bit more specific as we move forward on what you've heard as values and outcomes to get to those performance metrics. Again, I am always extremely worried about public process and getting ownership. While John has served on the OTC, done a lot of work in transportation as a professional, and building a project while there's traffic underway is sometimes the best way to do business. Sometimes it's just shutting it down and moving the bridge or the road, right? But there are trade-offs, and understanding those trade-offs and making it very transparent about what we are valuing and what we are going to invest in is the way to get ownership in a decision and not have it blow back and go too fast to have to go back and redo the entire process and take another 2 to 3 years. So I would just encourage you to start getting a little bit more specific. And in your timeline, you wanted to end this in June, and I think there was a time you're going to go to city council before a decision. I would just encourage you to make sure you're coming back to Metro Council and Merck before that to get input on these proposals, and for us to be able to see the work that's been done on performance metrics based on the community values and outcomes.
Absolutely.
So, thank you. Councilor Wong, then Rosenthal, and then Lewis.
Thank you, Madam President. And I was wondering from the development team if there are any case studies or analogs from cities across America that have done this type of work in renovating their performance venues, and how that went and what was the later economic impact. I know we're all kind of doing a new thing here in Portland, but this can't be the first place that's been done in the country. So are there any similar success stories from other cities that we might be able to glean information from?
Well, one of the most visible is Lincoln Center. in the Philharmonic Hall, which is part of the Lincoln Center complex. And it was built new about the same time that the 1967 renovation was done. By then, by the way, it was very extensive in 67. But Philharmonic Hall was rebuilt at a cost of $550 million, I believe. It's now called the Geffen Center. And the stories about its renovation that I've heard are really dramatic. Pardon, this is an analogy. Mary and I have lived in a house for 44 years, and we were real proud of it when we renovated it. But a realtor just came into the house and looked at it and said, "Oh my!" So that's just what happens with things that are 50 years old in this case.
I think, locally, as Shane has quite a bit of experience, and he is actually working with me to provide some help with other folks that he knows on the East Coast that have dealt with it, so that we could actually get firsthand, comments about what worked and what didn't work. So that's in progress.
Yeah, I think one of the questions I have is whenever cities go through this and they have a dark period or quiet period during that construction, also what did it take for, the shows and Broadway to come back and how long that took? So just,
right,
examples from the country of like how this process played out. So, we're not making the same mistakes or reinventing the wheel.
That anecdotally, we were told that they were wildly successful in terms of bringing people back. But like I said, we wanted to get it first party instead of third party, and we're working on that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Rosenthal and then Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize, I came on late because of another commitment, but I just had one question, I guess. I'm assuming that I was surprised at the difference in potential projected costs for the renovation versus the new facilities. I'm assuming that those projected costs did not include any cost for doing anything with, if there was a new facility, doing anything with the Keller, such as seismic upgrades or tearing down or anything like that. Is that correct? That those were just those sites related to new construction on a new site and did not include any sort of, what shall we call, retrofit or, putting to bed?
That's correct.
And just my comment is, in some point, various councils are going to have to reflect judgment. It's very hard to predict exactly the future. Studies are great, but the reality works out sometimes not exactly as we anticipate. So we have to use best judgment as well as good science.
Thank you. Counselor Lewis, are you?
I put my hand down. Counselor Rosenthal got to where I was thinking. We're talking about this in a binary of replace or repair. And if we go the replace route, there will be a slippery slope of what do you do with an old grand hall. An old grand hall is an old grand hall. Does it remain public or does it slip into private? A lot of cities have multiple grand halls. To the extent that lots of people have lots of different tastes in the arts, that's great. But in terms of our ability to create space that is as egalitarian as we've spoken about, the fact that you can get $35 tickets that are 10 feet away from the box seats, that happens in a public facility. So I'm pretty committed to making sure that the future of the Keller is public.
One thing that is also a factor is parking, because it exists, is dirt cheap. As opposed to going to a Blazers game where God knows what you pay. But I think my building charges $7 a night.
Yeah, you can park for any event for $5 to $7, which is because those garages have been there and there are 4,000 spaces. And we probably sell 1,000 to 1,300, depending on the size of the event in the neighborhood.
Okay, well, thank you. I just want to say thank you to our private sector partners for moving this conversation forward. It needed to happen, as Councilor Lewis said, for holding it through the pandemic and moving us forward and getting us to think big as a city, as a region. It is great to have folks such as yourselves coming forward and making that level of commitment, not just to the city, but to pushing forward our arts community and making sure that we are at the forefront and making sure that we are part of a comeback to the downtown economy and our tourism economy, which Metro is so part of, which is why you see the level of commitment from our counselors, is that we are part and parcel of the work that you are working on. So thank you from the bottom of, I think, all of our hearts for moving this forward. And I look forward to hearing more from the city on the problem statement. I'm not really sure that just saying the Keller is out of date and seismically needs to be retrofit is the problem statement. And I think what our panelists have said is that there's a bigger question about what is the future of arts and what is the future of the city of Portland encapsulated. And we need to get a little bit clearer on the problem statement so that when we're evaluating the alternatives, that it is clear which is actually meeting the needs of not just the Keller, but the greater community. And so I would really, I'm gonna be pushing, and I think hopefully you're already working on this in the background, but there's going to need to be some very transparent problem statement, values, outcomes, and performance metrics based on that in order to evaluate and make it as transparent as possible. Otherwise, we're going to be back at square one. And it will be a waste of taxpayer dollars to have gone through all this work. So if we can just circle back around, I would be most appreciative to all of your work. And I think it will speak highly to the outcome that we spent a little time making that more clear. So thank you to everybody who was there today. Much appreciated. And we look forward to working with you as we go through this process. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
We will, as you leave, we will move on to Chief Operating Officer Communications. Marisa?
Thank you, President Peterson. I'm just going to give folks a second to step outside.
Yes, well, we still have council meeting to go through. I see folks that are having conversations. I'm going to ask you to close down those conversations in the council chambers and move them to outside as quickly as you possibly can.
And watching and admiring.
Councilor Nolan? Thank you.
Okay, looks like we've got critical mass heading out. Good afternoon, President Peterson and councilors. I just wanted to share today, I think this presentation that you heard this morning is exciting to me. I had the opportunity to represent Metro yesterday at a press conference with the new owners of our beloved Thorns Soccer Club, football club. Being there and listening to the vision that the owners have for that team really struck me and I think moved folks in the room as they shared that their goal is for the Thorns to be not just the best women's team in the country, but in the world.
Hear, hear.
And for them to play world-class soccer and have world-class facilities. And I hear the echoes of that ambition today in this vision of Portland and the region and Oregon as a home for world-class activities, world-class facilities. And it kind of gives me goosebumps because I think there is a moment here where Portland is ready for that comeback. And there are people positioning themselves in places to materialize that ambition to make it happen, manifest it. And I see a really important role for Metro to play in facilitating, supporting, and being part of those efforts. And that ambition is rooted in a love for this region and a love for the state and a pride in where we come from. And it's just extremely exciting to me to be able to be a part of it in a small way. And I thought it was important to share in the context of what we heard this morning, whatever the outcome of this study is. There's a critical mass of folks who want to see Portland and the region excel. So, thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Communication, I'll call on Counselor Simpson first.
Thank you, President Peterson. Colleagues, as you know, when I began my term in January 23, I was appointed by President Peterson to the Urban Flood Safety and Water Quality District Board. I took over this work from Councilor Craddock, who worked on it, I believe, her entire term here at Metro for 12 years. Councilor Rosenthal also backs me up on that as my second in that space. And as you all can remember from our recent conversations, the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District Board will be considering referring a bond measure to voters for the May 25 ballot. But you'll also remember that because of the Downtown Task Force's recommendation for no new taxes, the board's original decision to ask voters for a $195 million bond is being reconsidered so that we can increase our likelihood of success at the ballot. Originally, we heard from the governor's office and from our business partners that they would be in favor of I think I need to go back and say May of 2024 is when we were going to refer that ballot. So I said 25, it's actually 24. Originally, we heard from the governor's office and from our business partners that they would be in favor of a $125 million bond. Yet I and many others felt that that would be insufficient to set up this new board on a skeleton budget, considering all the things that need to go into that levy. So through continued negotiations, we found that all of these groups and partners will be comfortable with a bond amount of $150 million, which is what I will be asked to vote on tomorrow at as Metro's representation on that board. Additionally, we would like to ask the legislature to help secure the additional funding of $45 million in the 2025 session to get the full amount back to $195. Before you and in your inboxes, if you're online, there's a joint draft letter from Metro, the Port of Portland, the Greater Portland Chamber of Commerce, Multnomah County, and the cities of Fairview, Chowdale, Gresham, and Wood Village that we would like to send to the Water Quality Board to express support for the funding package I just described. It's also important to refer this levy in May because the Army Corps needs a commitment for a local match by April 2025, or April 2025, and the November ballot of 24 is the backup in case May referral isn't successful. I'm hoping to get a consensus today from you all, my colleagues, to state Metro support for the proposal and specifically add Metro to this letter.
Thank you, Counselor Simpson. Due to Wi-Fi, I'm off camera, apologies. Counselor Rosenthal and then Juan.
Well, I'm not going to speak to Counselor Simpson's. I mean, we've talked about it, and I think we need to do it. I just want to report that.
Oh, I'm sorry, Counselor. We're gonna just sit on Counselor Simpson's request and not move on.
Yes, I know.
Okay, thank you. All right.
I wanted to report on something else.
All right, to the issue.
I was reporting on something else.
To
This
the
is
issue.
another issue.
To the issue on the table. Counselor Wong.
What's the issue on the table?
The letter.
The letter and the ballot.
The levy.
Oh.
The levy.
It's in your email.
It's in your email, Councilor Rosenthal.
Yeah, have not had a chance to access it.
All right, Counselor Wong and then Lewis and then Nolan to the issue on the table.
Thank you, Madam President, and I want to thank Councilor Simpson for all your work on this and threading the needle between all the various interest groups. You know, I think that really took some strong leadership and political acumen. I am supportive of this referral in the letter, but I didn't see the specific dollar amount you mentioned in any of the documents, and, you know, I see this resolution,
It's in the resolution title.
but in the kind of the be it resolved section, it's number 1, and be it resolved says general obligation bonds not to exceed 195 million for purposes outlined in the ballot title. So I don't know if this is like an old resolution.
Well, we are cutting it real close, Counselor Wong, because if you turn it back, this should have been adopted on the 23rd of January, and I think that was also,
So this is a previously adopted,
it hasn't been
Resolution.
adopted. We're gonna adopt it
okay.
on Thursday.
Okay.
But they need to, this is the latest and greatest that I was able to get this morning.
okay, but then it would be modified before a vote to
Yes.
have a dollar amount that you just stated. Okay, just wanted to be sure.
We will make sure to pass that to Jim Medoff. I want to honestly take my hat off to Betsy Emery and Andy Shaw. They've been really good at communicating and getting our message across of what we want in this ballot language and in this letter.
Okay, great, thank you.
Absolutely.
Counselor Lewis and then Nolan to the issue on the table.
Sure, thank you so much, Counselor, for bringing us this letter and for your work trying to herd cats the 12 years of history that is baked in. Really did look at this as a local and regional issue, which is why Metro had such a powerful place in the original place table with Oregon Solutions. I do think it takes a governor who, in her time in the House, represented a lot of levee adjacent properties to understand the international, national, and state significances of this work, and the opportunity to pivot at the exact right time so that there is state investment. I do think that the vision of making sure that this is a district that provides some of the over and above federal standard projects that are good for riparian areas, that are good for the environment, is a place where Metro has a particularly important and unique voice. And I'm interested in us holding that important conversation even after this goes to voters. So I look forward to this moving along, fully supportive. But then I think the role that we have to play, particularly now that it's kind of in the state's hands, if you will, is helping speak up for that balance between smart, pragmatic, property owner-based pricing, but also getting those riparian needs met.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Counselor Lewis, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Nolan.
Madam President, thanks. All of what's just been said, I agree with, and I just wanted to thank my colleague who shares the Columbia Corridor, who represents part of the Columbia Corridor with me. You've done the hard work, and I support the result you've recommended based on all of that. Herding cats, making sausage.
Thank you. That was some
Cheers.
hellified sausage making.
But not cat sausage.
Not cat
Oh.
sausage.
Oh, dear. All right.
End of that discussion.
Well,
Counselor Simpson, I just want to say thank you as well, and of course, to support the letter.
thank you, President Peterson. Thank you, colleagues. It means a lot. I think this year was it was hard work, and we got here. I'll make sure to take Counselor Wong's notes.
It's in the ballot measure too.
Yes.
Yeah.
I will make those necessary updates before I sign anything. Hopefully Betsy is listening.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate again what Counselor Lewis pointed out, and that is that this will continue to require some more investments. specifically in our riparian. And so I'm pleased that we can have a conversation about how we can participate fully in helping out, fully fund the plans that need to be enacted there in order to have a full and complete community and not just a levy. Thanks. All right, counselors, new information moving on from this levy ready letter. Counselor Vaughn?
Oh, sorry, are we moving on to new business? Okay. This past weekend was extremely celebratory. Myself and a number of our colleagues were able to attend a Chinese New Year celebration hosted by the Chinese Friendship Association, Eva Keller, on Friday evening. And then at our convention center, the Portland Chinese Times also had a day-long celebration. And just today, our AAPI Affinity Group hosted coffee and snacks down in the atrium. So it's been a celebratory time, and I just want to wish everyone here a happy Lunar New Year and to thank all the venue staff for hosting all these events.
Thank you. It was a great event at the Keller, just to bring it full circle. Counselors, any other communication? All right, thank you. And with that, we are adjourned. The work session is adjourned. Our next regular scheduled meeting is Thursday, February 8th at 10:30 a.m. And as a reminder, that meeting will be fully remote. All right, thank you.